Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atavanova, and we continue our operation today. It's day 831 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the situation in the south of our country. Joining us online is Dmitro, Pletenchuk, head of the Center for Strategic Communications of the Defense Forces of the south of the country. Good afternoon, Mr. Dmitro. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all of this. Everybody in the studio, good afternoon all of the spectators. Mr. Dmitro, so let's start with operation situation. What is it like for the time being? Well, as you've seen, last day the enemy was trying to assault our positions in Dnipro and Orikhiv axis, and we may state about certain relief of pressure, because previously the number of assaults was about 20. Within the last day it was about 12. Half of them was accounted for Orikhiv axis, plus 5 in the settlement of Krinki in Kherson axis, and another attempt on the island of Nestrika. All of them failed, especially the one in Nestrika Island. The picture after their assault was such that the censor doesn't let it through to the official media. Talking about Krinki, the village itself ceased to exist. There is no single, say, building to hide in, and enemy tries to establish their positions in the island of Nestrika. All of such attempts failed. The enemy continues using artillery and aviation. Talking about artillery, the enemy lost about 10 cannons yesterday in our area. They fulfilled their plans of losses. Yesterday there was 108 personnel, half of them dead, and the day before yesterday it was 180, including 80 dead. So despite the situation being pretty tense, it's still manageable and under control. The battle operations are continuing today. We continue using different types of weapons. We prevail over the enemy in terms of FPV drones. And talking about the sea, the situation remains stable over there. There was one diesel submarine which is capable of carrying missiles, but it was empty. It's one of those that launched the missiles during the last attack, and otherwise there are no vessels observed in the Black Sea basin other than those changing their ports. But the main problem in the sea is the presence of Russian aviation, which is pretty intense. It's represented by both reconnaissance drones that they keep losing in our area of responsibility, as well as different types of fighter jets, patrol aviation. So basically they use all of their fleet, starting with some models of rotary wing aircraft and ending with Sukhov MiGs and such unique specimens as Antonov 26, which is pretty obsolete, and BE-12. Mr. Dmitro, lately we keep hearing about the explosions in temporarily occupied Crimea. So can you please tell us about the latest consequences of such explosions? Well, as you see, it's been a year. Like I keep saying that all of the things happening in Crimea, they happen for a reason. We don't inflict just strikes blindly. We pursue our goals of liberating all of our territories, and Crimea plays quite an important part there, because they use Crimea for stationing of their aviation, so that they're capable of inflicting further strikes from strategic aviation, and cutting the enemy's logistics in Crimea is an extra important task. The Crimean bridge is not so important in these terms. Only quarter of the military logistics accounts for the use of the bridge. The railway to Crimea is not yet built, and the ferry is the key instrument of their logistics. Their military logistics in the Black Sea was disrupted. They were using their transport ships that started sinking periodically, and the enemy was using the ferries, trying to cover themselves with the civilians to transport the lion's share of their weapons and equipment to ensure their operations in the south of our country. And as you see, they experience serious problems with the use of that instrument, and even for the civilians, they established another route through Chongar. They had to move the civilians through the occupied part of Ukraine to get to the continental part of the so-called Russian Federation. Talking about the explosions in the oil, in the locations where the oil or POL are being stored, we confirmed another fact of use of Neptune missiles, Ukrainian manufactured, that destroyed certain fraction of our enemy's oil infrastructure, which is important because the infrastructure was ensuring the operations or supporting the operations of the enemy's military, or was ensuring the proceeds for the Russian budget. So one way or another, it impacts the enemy's ability to continue operations in Ukraine. Mr. Dmitro, you've mentioned the situation in the Black Sea. What is the situation in the Sea of Azov? Well, they continue using the Ukrainian ports to export the products that they pillage from Ukraine. And to do that, they either use the shadow fleet, which is incapable of reaching other ports, or they just switch off the transmitters. We have to understand the number of important things there. There are officially recognized ports of Russian Federation, and definitely the trade is going through those ports, and the vessels of foreign companies enter those ports. However, there may be a lot of other questions arising because the Strait of Kerch is the territory of Ukraine, and Ukraine prohibited officially the navigation in that part of the Black Sea because we are entitled to do so. But nevertheless, the Sea of Azov, in fact, is the internal sea of Russian Federation because they occupied the continental part of Ukraine, and they now use the Sea of Azov due to their necessities. They pillage Ukrainian metal, Ukrainian grain, and they use this territory to export this. Thank you, sir. We have questions on the floor. Good afternoon. I would like to ask you about the current situation generally in the sea. Is there a way to forecast any activities of Russian military in view of the current situation in the sea, or is it difficult to say what they're going to do? Well, forecasting is going on along with the planning. It's a normal thing. Obviously, not all of the forecasts come true because we're dealing with the Russians here. They are pretty unpredictable Christian people. Well, and planning something with 100% probability is difficult. We can only state that there is the trend for use of the submarines. They have 4 submarines, one of which is not a carrier of the cruise missiles. One of them remains in the port due to reasons we don't know, and 2 of them they continue using. Probably they've solved the problem with loading the cruise missiles, and the rest of their fleet remains at their stations, and there are no trends to be observed for its exit from the ports, and thus we may forecast that they will use the occupied territory of Ukraine for the ballistics launches against Ukraine. Obviously, there will be presence of Russian aviation in the air in the equator of the Black Sea, but again, this is an issue that our colleagues from the Air Force, with the support of our foreign colleagues, will shortly solve, I hope. And I'm having another question. Well, currently there are certain reliefs in view of the decrease of the assaults of the enemy in your area of responsibility. What is the probability of their intense offensive in the sea? Well, in the sea basin, they don't have a lot of options for the time being. If you mean them going to the sea basin to exercise some activities in the equator of the Black Sea, well, there are no signs of establishment of the offensive armies in our areas of responsibility. And dear colleagues, I apologize, I have to proceed to another broadcast. Thank you very much, Mr. Dmitro. I'm reminding you, dear colleagues, joining us was Mr. Dmitro Pletenchuk, head of the Center for Strategic Communications of the Defense Forces of the South. Thank you very much, and we'll see you at 14:30, and we will be talking about the end of the academic year and the admission campaign for the year 2024. So stay tuned. Let's continue working together for our victory. See you shortly.